The community center had never seen anything like it. Karen arrived 20 minutes early for the emergency HOA board meeting, wheeling in a presentation easel, a projector, and 3 bankers' boxes labeled EVID and C. Hendeer son VIO8AIONs in her precise block lettering. She'd spent the past week expanding her investigation beyond the pool incident, and she was ready to prove that her methods, however unconventional, were absolutely necessary. "Good evening, fellow board members," she announced to the empty room, testing her microphone with the confidence of someone who'd practiced the speech in her bathroom mirror 47 times. But as residents began filing in, Karen realized something had shifted in the week since her confrontation with the Hendersons. Instead of the usual handful of retirees who attended these meetings out of civic duty, the room was packed. Families she'd never seen at HOA events filled every chair, and more people stood along the walls. Board member Janet Williams, a soft-spoken retired teacher, called the meeting to order with obvious reluctance. "We're here tonight to discuss recent concerns about community oversight methods." "If I may," Karen interrupted, clicking her presentation remote. The first slide appeared, a detailed architectural drawing of the Henderson property with measurements, annotated in red ink. "I've prepared a comprehensive presentation on the systematic violations occurring at 1247 Maple Grove Lane." "Karen, that's enough," said a voice from the back. Mrs. Chen, the elderly woman who'd been Karen's neighbor for 8 years, stood up with the aid of her walking cane. "I've known you since you moved here. You helped me plant my roses. You drove me to the doctor when I broke my wrist. What happened to that person?" A murmur rippled through the crowd, but Karen pressed on. "Mrs. Chen, I understand this seems harsh, but property values affect everyone. One unauthorized pool heater today, complete neighborhood decline tomorrow." "Complete neighborhood decline?" Tom Henderson stood up, his voice carrying clearly across the room. "Karen, you spent 3 days living in a storm drain to measure water temperature. You built a tree fort to spy on my 6-year-old daughter. You filed 16 separate violation reports in the past month, including one against the Johnsons for having their garbage cans visible from the street, 40 minutes before pickup time." Karen felt the room's energy shift, but she'd come too far to back down now. Rules exist for a reason. Without enforcement, we're just another declining suburb with pizza boxes in yards and cars on blocks. "Has anyone here ever seen a car on blocks in this neighborhood?" asked Sarah Henderson. The silence was deafening. Janet Williams cleared her throat. "Karen, the board has discussed this, and we're concerned about the intensity of your approach. Several residents have filed complaints." Karen's heart began racing. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She was protecting their community, their investments, their way of life. "How many complaints?" she heard herself ask. 43, Janet said quietly. "In 6 months." The number hit Karen like a physical blow. 43 neighbors, people she'd lived near for nearly a decade, had formally complained about her actions. She looked out at the sea of faces, searching for support, but found only disappointment, frustration, and in some cases, genuine fear. "I moved to remove Karen Whitmore as HOA president," said a man she recognized but couldn't name. "Her methods have gone far beyond reasonable community oversight." "Seconded," came another voice, then another. As Janet called for the vote, Karen stood frozen at her presentation easel. The slides she prepared, charts of violation frequencies, graphs of property value correlations, a detailed timeline of her surveillance activities, suddenly looked less like evidence and more like the obsessive documentation of someone who'd lost sight of what community actually meant. The vote was 38-4, with 12 abstentions. In less than 5 minutes, Karen's reign as HOA president was over. Walking home alone, dragging her presentation materials behind her on a squeaking cart, Karen passed the Henderson house. Through their backyard gate, she could see Emma playing in the allegedly illegal pool, her laughter carrying on the evening air like an accusation. For the first time in months, Karen wondered what she'd actually been protecting, and what she'd destroyed in the process. The rubber ducky bobbed against Karen Whitmore's shoulder as she adjusted her position in the makeshift pool she'd created by blocking the storm drain with sandbags. Steam rose from the surprisingly warm water, a result of the broken underground pipe she discovered while conducting her weekly neighborhood inspection. "Ma'am, what exactly are you doing?" Officer Martinez asked, his hand instinctively moving toward his radio as he processed the surreal scene before him. Karen didn't even flinch. She'd been expecting this moment for 3 days, ever since she'd realized her master plan was working perfectly. "I'm conducting a water quality assessment for the Willowbrook Estates Homeowners Association," she replied calmly, producing a laminated clipboard from somewhere beneath the sudsy water. "Section 12B of our covenant clearly states that all water sources within the community boundaries must be tested for compliance." The second officer, a young woman named Chen, exchanged glances with her partner. "Ma'am, that's a storm drain. You're bathing in street runoff." "Testing," Karen corrected firmly, standing up in her modest one-piece bathing suit, water cascading dramatically around her. "And according to my measurements, this water is consistently 7 degrees warmer than what the Henderson family has been using to fill their above-ground pool. Pool heating systems require HOA approval, which they never received." Officer Martinez rubbed his temples. In 15 years of police work, he'd never encountered anything quite like this. "So you're telling me you've been sitting in a gutter for 3 days to prove a point about your neighbor's pool temperature?" Karen's eyes lit up with the fervor of a woman who'd found her calling. "Not just sitting, officer, documenting. Every temperature reading, every pH level, every mineral content analysis. I've got 47 pages of evidence that the Hendersons are in direct violation of community standards." She climbed out of her improvised spa with surprising grace, wrapping herself in a towel that read "World's #1 HOA President" in glittery letters. The officers watched in fascination as she began packing up an elaborate setup that included a camping chair, a portable umbrella, and what appeared to be a small hibachi grill. "Where's the broken pipe you mentioned?" Officer Chen asked, scanning the area. Karen's smile could have powered the entire neighborhood. "Oh, there's no broken pipe. I've been heating the water myself with camping equipment. Much more cost-effective than the Hendersons' illegal heating system, wouldn't you agree?" The realization hit both officers simultaneously. This wasn't mental illness or a publicity stunt. This was strategic warfare, HOA style. Karen had spent 3 days living in a storm drain to build a case against her neighbors, and she was absolutely proud of it. "Ma'am," Officer Martinez said slowly, "you can't just live in the street drainage system." "I'm not living here," Karen replied, shouldering her waterproof bag with the confidence of a woman who'd thought of everything. "I'm conducting authorized community oversight. There's a difference." As she walked away, dripping and triumphant, both officers realized they'd just encountered something far more dangerous than any criminal they'd ever arrested. A homeowners association president with unlimited time, unwavering determination, and absolutely no sense of normal human boundaries. Karen's war room had once been her dining room, but that was before she'd discovered her true calling as Willowbrook Estates' self-appointed guardian of property values. Now the mahogany table groaned under the weight of file folders, surveillance equipment, and a detailed scale model of the neighborhood she'd constructed from foam board and an alarming amount of craft glue. "The Henderson pool situation is just the beginning," she muttered to herself, adjusting the tiny plastic pool in the model while reviewing the 47 pages of evidence she'd collected during her 3-day gutter bath. "If we let one family heat their water without approval, where does it end? Unauthorized garden gnomes? Unlicensed wind chimes?" The doorbell's chime interrupted her strategic planning. Through the peephole, she saw Tom Henderson standing on her porch, his usually friendly face twisted into an expression she'd never seen before. Behind him, his wife Sarah held their 6-year-old daughter's hand, and Karen could see the child had been crying. "Karen, we need to talk," Tom said the moment she opened the door. His voice carried a weight that made her instinctively step back. "If this is about the pool temperature investigation, I have every legal right." "Legal right?" Sarah's voice cracked as she stepped forward. "You've been taking pictures of our backyard for weeks. Emma's afraid to play outside because she thinks the angry lady is watching her. Karen felt a strange flutter in her chest. Not guilt, exactly, but something uncomfortable. I was merely documenting potential covenant violations. The telephoto lens ensures accuracy from a respectful distance. Respectful? Tom's laugh held no humor. Karen, you built a surveillance platform in your oak tree. Our daughter found you up there at 6 a.m. yesterday, taking notes on her swimming lessons. The uncomfortable feeling in Karen's chest intensified. She hadn't considered how her methods might appear to a child. But before she could formulate a response, her phone buzzed with a text from her daughter Madison, who lived 3 states away. Mom, Mrs. Chen from next door called me. Says you've been acting strange. Are you okay? I'm maintaining community standards, Karen said, though her voice lacked its usual conviction. The HOA board voted me president because they trust my judgment. They voted you president because no one else wanted the job, Sarah said quietly. And because we thought you'd organize potluck dinners and coordinate snow removal, not this. Tom pulled out his phone and showed Karen a video that made her blood run cold. It was security footage from their backyard camera, showing Karen in full camouflage here, measuring their pool with what appeared to be a homemade depth gauge while their family slept. When did you become this person? Tom asked, and the genuine sadness in his voice hit Karen harder than anger would have. We used to wave to each other every morning. Sarah brought you soup when you had pneumonia last winter. We were friends, Karen. The words were hung in the air like a verdict. Karen looked at little Emma, who was peeking out from behind her mother's legs with wide, frightened eyes, and something inside her chest cracked. But then she saw her war room behind her, all those hours of meticulous documentation, and the crack sealed itself with familiar determination. Friendship doesn't supersede property values, she said, closing the door. Through the window, she watched the Henderson family walk back to their house, Sarah's arm around Emma's shoulders. Her phone buzzed again. Madison, asking if she wanted to video chat this weekend. Karen stared at the message for a long moment, then turned back to her model neighborhood. But for the first time in weeks, the tiny plastic houses looked less like a kingdom to protect and more like a prison she'd built around herself. Karen's house had been silent for 3 days. No morning announcements into her voice recorder about daily patrol routes. No evening documentation sessions. No strategic planning for the next day's surveillance activities. She'd unplugged her doorbell after the 7th reporter showed up wanting to interview the storm drain HOA lady for their human interest segment. The viral video had started innocently enough. Someone at the board meeting had recorded her presentation about the Henderson pool violations. But it was the 3-second clip of her explaining her gutter bathing methodology that caught the internet's attention. Within 48 hours, #StormDrainKaren was trending, and her methodical explanation of aquatic property value enforcement had been turned into countless memes. Her phone buzzed constantly with calls from news outlets, late-night talk shows, and something called a podcast network, whatever that was. But the call that finally made her answer came from Madison. Mom, are you okay? Her daughter's voice carried 3 states' worth of worry. I've been seeing these videos online, and people are saying I've lost my mind, Karen finished, staring at her reflection in her darkened television screen. Maybe they're right. Talk to me, Madison said gently. When did you last eat a real meal? When did you last sleep more than 4 hours? Mom, Mrs. Chen called me again. She's worried about you. Karen looked around her war room, seeing it clearly for the first time in months. Surveillance photos covered every wall like the workspace of an unhinged detective. Her model neighborhood sat in the center of the table, tiny plastic residents frozen in their perfect, controllable world. I was trying to protect something, she said quietly. But I don't remember what anymore. Do you remember why you moved to Willowbrook in the first place? Madison asked. The question hit Karen unexpectedly. She did remember. She'd chosen the neighborhood because of the block parties, the way neighbors helped each other with yard work, how Mrs. Chen had brought her homemade cookies the day she moved in. She'd wanted to belong to something warm and real. I became the thing I was afraid of, Karen realized aloud. I was so scared of the neighborhood declining that I became the reason people wanted to leave. A knock at her front door interrupted her conversation. Through the peephole, she saw Emma Henderson standing on her porch, holding her mother's hand and clutching a piece of paper. "Mom, I have to go," Karen said. "But Madison, would you maybe visit next weekend? I think I need help figuring out how to be a person again." Karen opened the door to find Emma offering her a crayon drawing of two stick figures by a blue rectangle. "Mommy said you were sad," Emma said in the matter-of-fact way of 6-year-olds. "This is you and me at our pool. You can come swim if you want, but you don't have to take pictures." Sarah Henderson stood behind her daughter, her expression cautious but not unkind. "Emma insisted on making this for you. She said everyone needs a friend." Karen knelt down to Emma's eye level, accepting the drawing with trembling hands. "Thank you, sweetheart. This is beautiful." "Are you still angry at our pool?" Emma asked. Karen looked at this child she'd terrified with her surveillance, this family she'd harassed in the name of property values, and felt something crack open inside her chest, not the brittle crack of breaking, but the warm crack of thawing. "No, honey, I'm not angry at your pool. I was just confused about what was important." After the Hendersons left, Karen sat in her war room holding Emma's drawing. Outside her window, she could see neighbors walking their dogs, kids playing in yards, the ordinary magic of a community that had somehow survived her attempts to control it. She picked up her phone and dialed Janet Williams' number. "Janet, it's Karen. I know I'm no longer president, but would the board consider a community apology dinner? My treat. I think I owe everyone a proper explanation, and maybe we could talk about what this neighborhood actually means." As she began taking down her surveillance photos, Karen caught sight of herself in the hallway mirror. For the first time in months, the woman looking back at her didn't look like she was at war with the world. But in the basement, tucked behind her Christmas decorations, sat boxes of files she'd never shown the board, evidence of irregularities she'd discovered about the HOA's finances, about certain board members' connections to local contractors, about decisions made in meetings that were never properly recorded. Some battles, Karen thought as she climbed the stairs, were worth fighting after all. She just needed to learn the difference between protecting a community and controlling it. The real question was, did she have enough credibility left to make anyone listen?